Okay. Let's see what we have here. Looks like we opened 75.12 and the straddle's about 30. Just double check the straddle here. Yeah, straddle's 30. So we open here. 30 points down would be almost a gap fill, 74.81. It's a straddle, so I'll adjust that. And to the upside, add 30 to this, and you end up at 40. So that's the opening straddle there, 30 points. We got a pretty large gap though that I wanted to think we would work on, especially after rejecting 75.55 yesterday during the Globex session, since futures were open but SPX wasn't. But there's significantly large positioning. And then let me transition over to the OptionsDepth chart. And here you can see basically a negative gamma position, 75.50. So customers here are long calls likely. So it shows up as a dealer short position, which causes a negative gamma. And this position here is very mean reverting. Like we were likely to reject off of it and then come back down or retrace a little. Whether or not we retrace to the SPX gap fill, completely different story. But I have to give some edge to potentially filling the gap after that 75.50 rejection that we essentially got during the Globex section yesterday. YM is headed down, and NQ and ES did like an SMT divergence there between the around 630 highs and 830 highs. Zoom in a little bit here. Yeah, the 75.55 positioning. Where did that change? 75.55 intraday. Yeah, 75.55. This is a driver here. Our line in the sand. This basically decides whether or not we reject here, or if we break up and then we drift up towards this 75.85, 75.90 zone. Because this dark blue is generally magnetic and stable. To the downside, wouldn't imagine anything really vicious, because downside it looks very supportive based on all these like little blue areas that you see. These positive gamma areas. So they're selling, customers are basically selling volatility down there. Oh yeah, it's already starting to move. Yeah, this thing's already going. I like the 5-minute SPX first candle there, the opening candle. Would definitely suggest more downside. But this is the overnight low, and generally we see some sort of bounce here, fill in a few fair value gaps, and then maybe move lower. If the bias is gap fill. NQ is quite a bit stronger today. YM was the one that was doing the massive pullback. I think there's still more room for YM heading down, but we almost hit the naked POC on YM. It's also a high volume node. Which is also the gap fill on YM futures. NQ also has a massive gap to fill on futures. Right, I'm going to zoom in a little here. Looks like we're in this negative gamma block. Negative dealer positioning block, which generally has like a localized gamma, a negative gamma effect. You can kind of see it on the ODTE gamma chart here. Kind of starts at 75.10, and that's more or less where the negative positioning starts. And as we run towards 75.30, we get quite a bit deeper into the negative gamma. Price action staying outside of the negative gamma effects though on the day, because this is how the zero gamma line or the negative gamma affects over the day. So it kind of just like curves. 75.30. Yeah, this cluster is building up quite a bit here. 75.30. Generally, I like to play rejections off these cluster edges. And it's always like plus or minus 5 points or so. This positioning adjusts the gamma chart quite a bit, and we're getting 1 minute updates here. $75.20. I'd like to see us react a little bit higher here. But that was a good overnight low sweep and go long. And gave you 10 points there. Quite the divergence between ES and NQ though. And charm is suppressive. Oddly high right now for the beginning of the day, but I'm just keeping it at the back of my mind right now. Oh, hey, Koshik. Here, let me transition over so you can see information from the other chart here. And the straddle's 30 points from open. Yeah, just since I think you're just joining us now, but one of the things that I noted was the gamma chart and the positioning going into, I guess, that we saw over the weekend. If it'll load here. But there is massive positioning at 75.55 on SPX. I think we ended up rejecting about 75.50 SPX yesterday. And it was kind of like the perfect rejection off the 75.5 level, which had a dealer negative gamma positioning there. You can see that here. It's only about 2,200 positions, but it was pretty large relative to everything else. Now, I think the positioning is showing up at 75.50 for some weird reason. A bit of a discrepancy there. But yeah, so 75.50 would have been like a nice rejection play overnight there, yesterday into today or this morning or whenever futures opened, 6 p.m. New York time yesterday. Yeah, that long would have been nice off of the overnight lows there. What was that? We bounced off like 75.08. 75.08. I really thought we would like run a little bit lower, but we didn't even do that. But yeah, you're right. That would have been a good long. We were talking about it too on here, but let's see what the edge of this cluster will do. 10 a.m. news. Yeah, okay, I see it. Quite the divergence today between ES and NQ. And NQ looks like it's going to sweep its Globex high from yesterday. We've already swept the overnight high, the opening high on NQ there. But I would think we're gonna go for all-time highs here, since it's so close. After seeing that down move, I really thought we would get somewhat of a gap fill, but it really wasn't much. Like we still have like a 30 to 40 point gap there on SPX. Not to mention the ES gap. NQ gap still exists too. YM gap is like almost completely closed. $75.28 on SPX. $25.40. It was like a V-shaped move. V-shaped move. Let's see NQ sweep this Globex high. I know SpaceX IPOs come in about 2 to 3 weeks or something like that. So I wonder if we're going to see a massive rotation there. So like the semis, SMH, ticker has been getting pumped like no tomorrow. Damn, pretty good rejection there. I would have wanted to see an NQ sweep of the Globex high to enter that short. I mean, what did we hit? We ended up hitting 75.29, which is pretty close to the edge of this cluster. So 75.30 plus or minus 5 points. I really wanted to see us run a little bit higher there to play that short. Yeah, like what I'm seeing from a lot of the analysts that I follow, they're thinking that SpaceX might cause like the semis to top out. Semis to top out, semiconductor stocks. And if they do in fact top out, then all that money will rotate into SpaceX IPO. And if that's the case, all the investors get to sell their initial investment, and then they get out. And I think guys like Chamath and all these smart guys that were, and all these rich dudes that are in the same podcast, they were talking about wanting to get out of the market. So it sounds like that's their opportunity to kind of cash out on all their investments, since the market is so frothy. And things should slow down if we move into 7,500 and through to 74.75. Things will be quite slow. That's all very supportive, and it stabilizes the movement. Yeah, well, I think it's regarding the SpaceX IPO. I actually don't know if it'll give them dividends, but I think it's just the initial rich dudes that invested prior to IPO. They use IPO as an opportunity to get out and get their funds back, and then some. And all that gets transferred to, I guess, whatever these rich dudes sell, or the initial investors, they sell, and they sell on to like the pensions and 401ks, retirement savings people. And I guess that ultimately ends up being like, quote unquote, bag holder, but I wouldn't call them bag holders because the market just keeps pumping. So but yeah, I wouldn't know about the dividends. That'll be an interesting one to see if they'll offer dividends. I don't know much about the SpaceX IPO besides like it's in about 2 to 3 weeks. So far, just fluctuating in this negative strike cluster. 75.30 and looks like 75.10 changed. So the cluster is getting a little bit smaller. Still got 5 minutes to the news. $9.51. That 9.51 move. Oh, that 9.50 move down was driven by a news headline. Channel 12 Israel. Israel ground operation in Lebanon begins beyond the yellow line. All right, let's see what happens after NQ sweeps here. The Globex highs from yesterday. All right, there's a sweep. Yeah, what I didn't love about the ES one is that it was like, I think it swept by like one tick at overnight low. I thought it would just run a little bit further down for that move up. Everything happened pretty abruptly. And I think from that sweep, it pumped like 20 points. Okay, so YM here looks like we're ready for the gap fill. Okay. So is that the news? Yeah, the news is out. If YM bottoms out here after the gap fill, we could see a run up on ES. But NQ, I don't know if NQ is going to top out here. But it's just something to pay attention to. All right, here's NQ. Let's see how this 5-minute closes. YM is moving back up after this gap fill. I gravitate towards 75.50 ES. Yeah, that'd be a good spot. It does seem like that. Especially with YM pushing now. What, 5 points away from here? 75.40 SPX. Yep. So as NQ stalls here, YM is picking up the slack. ES just looks like it wants up here. And YM's carrying it. So we'll see if we can get some sort of setup from a candle perspective. It's not loving anything here. There's a slight stall on NQ. Straddle high takes us to 75.40. What's the current straddle looking like? Current straddle is 24. Yeah, up here I would want to see like a run towards 75.50 and then reject there. But that would be like an ideal short for me on SPX, 75.50 SPX. I think that local high from 6 p.m., roughly around 6 p.m. 75.51 on ES. Should take us to about 35, 37 SPX. Short 2. Okay. A bit of SMT here on the 1 minute time frame between ES and NQ. But the 1 hour looks like it wants to run up. No Alma levels here either. I'm just looking at the intraday breakdown by strike to kind of hopefully give us a clue. And it is technically almost at the edge of it. Well, it was the previous edge of this negative gamma cluster. Well, YM is coming back down. Okay, what's going to give ES this push? Or do we not get this push? Not even equal highs? 48.50. 48.50, yeah, equal highs. Odd. YM's pulling back. Maybe NQ gives ES the push it needs. YM's really dragging it now. Right, there goes NQ. ES should follow here. VIX has actually been holding up. Little bit of a spot up, vol up effect. And take a look at the Vanna chart real quick. We're in negative Vanna, so I guess that makes sense for spot up, vol up dynamics. YM's pushing further down here. NQ hovering above that 30,000 NQ mark. Four hour looks like it wants to go up too on ES. Yeah, I'm just not seeing anything here that I want to take. Yeah, the best opportunity was the one that you picked up on, which is the long off the overnight low. They're making this hard too because between YM and NQ, they're going opposite ways. Shorting NQ at 10 o'clock. Let me see how I look at 10. It seemed worth a shot there on NQ, especially after the sweep. Just didn't know how it would react. Like that 5-minute candle. I mean, we wicked. I believe we wicked right below it or something, or equal lows, pretty close to equal lows. But yeah, I would have given NQ the edge to kind of pull back a little, and then YM to kind of pick up the slack to help ES propel up. But instead, that didn't happen, right? So now there's that ES sweep. So you're going to pull back on NQ here slightly. But I just don't know, like with ES here. I feel like I'd be forcing something if I took a trade here. But I really wanted to see us retest that gap and then propel up. I think that was kind of my bias going in this morning, which is why it's been hard to go long. Like that initial long off the overnight lows. Yeah, but not much of a reaction off that sweep there. $74. 75.35 on SPX. Nothing here. Yeah, at this point, I would want to see 75.50 tested. Get close enough to 75.50. And that would be my... How many points would that be? About 10, 15 points. 10. So that would be the overnight high for today. If we hit 75.50, that would be overnight high on ES. This is about 15 points up. And that would be my high probability short. Except if we made it all the way up there, the chart would look very... It would look pretty bullish. So it's hard to say. NQ still pushing here. Yeah, if we hit 75.50, I think that's where my short would have to be. If the size comes off, I'd be a bit worried. And it looks like it's slowly dissipating here. Looking at about 1800 in sizing. They're all long calls there. ES is way slow in comparison to NQ here. Makes sense because YM's kind of pulling back. This one here is a daily gamma chart that I like to watch. And it's showing the center at 75.55. So we've already rejected that yesterday during Globex, I believe. So if we rejected that, yeah, 75.52 was the high. Oh, NQ is on a ripper here. Yeah, 75.50 is coming off on SPX here. I would imagine as we get closer to the strike, if we don't move up above it, dealers will have to start selling whatever they had in order to hedge that positioning. So if the dealers sell, naturally you get suppressive flows. And then whoever had that position would have to close out that position as we get closer and closer into expiration. NQ doesn't pull back at all. Holy cow. It just keeps ripping. And VIX is actually headed up here. Started off the day, or the low on VIX was around 16.76. We're up to 16.95. So really, VIX technically hasn't really done much, but we are drifting up in the VIX. Yeah, I have nothing high probability here. Could see a pullback off this sweep. I think you were looking for it, right, Koshik? It also happens to be the edge of the negative gamma cluster, but this cluster is not very, like, it's been changing a little. Still in suppressive charm. The charm is a little lighter now, which I'm assuming because of the positioning that has changed. Initially, I wanted to see us run towards the supportive zone over here. Around 74.75 to 74.90. 74.90 would have been ideal. But I think we only got down to about 75.08. On SPX. Yeah, this would have been like super supportive going into 74.75, and then would have wanted to play a bounce off 74.70 back into this cluster. Everything would be quite slow since it's so supportive there. But this negative gamma cluster, it's starting to kind of fade as positions start coming off. Holy smokes, there goes. All right, so that's 75.38. We're almost at the straddle high, the price in straddle at the beginning of the day. Straddle as of 10:30 is 23 points. This NQ rocket ship is amazing. Yeah, the 1 hour on the ES was the tell, I guess. It just looked like it wanted up. And as you said, Koshik, you mentioned gravitate towards 75.50 ES. Pretty spot on. NQ, I have no idea where it's going because I don't have positioning. I'd have to look at a book map or something. I'm not seeing much either from the bookmap perspective, but the stream on bookmap doesn't seem to zoom out far enough on NQ. So it's hard to tell. Yeah, and positioning is starting to die off here from the 75-20 to 75-35 range. They just keep dissipating. Why I'm sitting stagnant here. Positioning has actually evolved substantially. This used to be a negative gamma position from 75.50 to 75.60, or negative gamma impact anyways. But now 75.55 to 75.65 is starting to look like a stabilization zone. Now, I still want to see a rejection off 75.50 should we get there. US Navy restarts guiding ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Assisting vessels crossing through the strait. The official told Wall Street Journal that a Greek supertanker laden with 2 million barrels of crude was guided by the US Navy as it crossed the waterway. The officials said that the Navy plans to help about a dozen vessels, including supertankers and container ships, to cross through the water. I think there were some like explosions reported, which is likely why we had a pullback last night. But I mean, the pullback was nothing major. Transitioning back to the SPX charts, yeah, we're approaching that straddle here. It took us about, I don't know, 45 minutes almost. Yeah, it took us about 45 minutes to get like a 9-point move there. So things are moving quite slow. Yep, there's just nothing here for me. Though when I was watching the overnight move, I was looking at this 75.54 level for a potential play downwards, but nothing crazy. It never did retrace until now. Yeah, the only short I was looking at was 75.50 on SPX. I should say on SPX. But yeah, that initial overnight low was definitely the better play. I was a little biased down, so I thought maybe we might run a little bit further down than wick off. And if we wicked, that would be perfect for a long, but we just ticked it. It was like one tick below that overnight low. YM has been stagnant for like the past 15-30 minutes. Hasn't really moved much. Yeah, as for a short, like typically I would like that 1035 candle. It's a 1035 5-minute candle, 5-minute high volume, and there's quite the wick on top too. That would normally be my cup of tea. But I feel like NQ's already gone so far already. So fast. And it's like really hard to short here. Oh, sorry. It's hard not to want to short. Like it's hard to long here. But I'm definitely not seeing much. It's like it's just waiting for some news. To do anything. YM is just standing still for the most part. It looks like it's grinding down, but for like the past 15 minutes, it's stayed relatively neutral. Shadow's still sitting at around 22. But I'm trying not to force anything on my end. It's just brutal price action so far. Looks like that 5-minute candle with the high volume top wick, 1035, seems to be working out, but only if you had a decent entry. I mean, it retraced almost the entire candle, made it equal high there. Moment of truth. Okay, YM is finally moving. So there, at 75.55 level was the level that I was watching last night for a retracement into like a 1 hour fair value gap there to play the further down move. But I just didn't see that in terms of positioning on the intraday ODTE positions to want to short that one. But I had resting orders there at 7553 overnight, and we never ended up hitting it. Funny how that works. And we're just hitting it now. Good rejection there. Right towards VWAP. What's interesting is the NQ VWAP is way down there. Not quite sure why. And use the 50% as a like take profit zone or like a pullback retracement zone. I think it's just us in here. Today was a pretty boring day. Wow, this thing's just starts selling off here. I'm gonna cry. Or 1 hour, 30 minutes. Yeah, okay. Let's see. 30-minute chart there. Yeah, that short trade seems to be working. And the 5-minute high volume wick at 10:35 was the indicator. I hesitated a little. Actually, I hesitated a lot. I was just staring at it, and we were kind of messing around there for like a good 10-15 minutes before really going. But say you entered at the close of that candle, 75.51. It's a good 10 points. My high probability short was at 75.50. But had I kept on my orders from overnight at 75.53, basically the 1 hour fair value gap, retest, and then down. It would have been a winner. It's insane. The 75.25. This is brutal. The price action was so slow moving up. And then it terminated at that 5-minute 10:35 candle. On the 15-minute, it didn't really look like much to me. I didn't really like it. On the 30-minute, there was a decent, I mean, if you wanted to test it, it would be like almost a 10-point stop loss. On the 30-minute chart, it did a top wick too. Nothing too crazy though. But you would have wrote it down for about 7 points up to here. Funny enough, VIX is trickling down because of negative Vanna, I guess. All right, it's really going now. Come on. That was brutal. Anyways, your read on that was pretty good, Koshik. I know you were saying a drift up towards 75.50. We got that drift up towards 75.50. Ended up running up a little bit higher than that. Because there's some fair value gaps there on the 15-minute and on the 1 hour from overnight. Yeah, it's funny because like I had 75.53, maybe 0.25 or something like that. 75.53, let's just say 75.53. I had that as my overnight short level that I just left orders on, thinking that overnight we would come and test that maybe during European trading hours, and then we would spool down for like the gap fill. But we didn't get that move up during London hours. Instead, we came up now and tapped it. Even the 6 o'clock move, we got close to it, but we didn't tap it. And when I got on the computer, I was like, oh, my orders are still sitting there. I'm gonna close it because my thesis was off. Anyways, it would have played out now, and it would have played out reasonably decent for like 10 to 15 points. Gotta love that. But that was a good take profit that you had on the that you had shown. And now are we headed back up finally? Yeah, I'm not sure. I think it's going to be a no trade day for me. But I'm going to get very antsy by the afternoon and maybe even into tomorrow if I don't get a trade. So I'm going to have to try to lock in my mental. Yeah, no problem. I'll be right back anyways. I get some water. Looks like we're trickling quite a bit lower here. Very supportive below. Seems like this move is NQ driven. Straight half an hour candle, 15-minute candle looks decent. I don't know. The risk is so large. I want to play downside here. Straddle is only like 20 points. We've already moved 20 points. That is faded. Wow. And the puts start coming. Okay, that's a high volume bottom wick. Oh, these are all calls that are coming in. I'm going long calls. Should continue trickling down, in my opinion. What, 7,500? 7,500 is about 20 points away. 7,500. 7,500. Seems reasonable. $7,500 seems like the stable balance zone. Could be magnetic. It's going to require a lot of effort to get above that negative gamma. All that negative gamma positioning just came out of nowhere. pretty well-sized pullback there. 20 points from the highs, and I suppose that's technically the straddle too. At that time, it was like around 20, 23. So I went about 20 points there. I want to think this comes down towards 7,500. Like that's a stable point. So that's about 15 points away. A little bit of SMT here between ES and NQ. Yeah, I have to wonder if NQ would want to run towards that VWAP, which will allow it to fill most of its higher time frame gaps, fair value gaps, I should say. But the market wasn't kind enough to give me a 75.50 entry. A 10 point short, I would say. That it turned at where I had my orders last night, which I took off today. So it is what it is. Yeah, and now it looks like we're gonna come down and possibly test part of that gap. I'd like to see 7,500, very stable. It can ultimately run towards like 74 to 80. All of that's like very magnetic and stabilizing. NQ is back to 30,000. Oh, under 30,000 now. It seems like it's just going to spool down here. Koshik, your paper trade, spot on. I support your Discord career. Because that was like the absolute top. I mean, I kind of liked it. Especially after that 10:35. Anytime a 10:35 candle, 5 minutes, a 5-minute candle like that occurs, it's a higher volume wick. It's almost as if it's like a termination candle, and could have got a pretty low risk entry on the wick retest. Like you could have even gotten it at 54, which would have been like a 1 point stop loss. What makes me sad is on stream, I think I said that this would typically be my trade. But today had me second guessing everything. And also the dealer profile didn't exactly line up to where I wanted that rejection. But from a fair value gap perspective on a higher time frame, it made a lot of sense. Now, if I go check all this positioning, all this new positioning here between 75.15 and through to 75.50. 75.15 has both customer long calls and puts. So they're different customers are betting on different things. $75.20, they're long calls and some short puts there. So they, again, customers are kind of betting on different things. $12.39, $12.39 long calls. But yeah, there are a lot of long calls, primarily long calls. So they're all betting for the upside on this pullback. So if for instance, we don't move up, all those guys will have to close out. And then dealers actually have to start selling what they bought up to hedge these calls because it was close to the money. So dealers start selling futures in order to hedge that positioning. Yeah, I think so too. But this was a key test, 75.15. Maybe bounce back up a little. Especially after that 5-minute doji candle. High volume too. $7,500 ES. Yeah, I'd aim for 7,500 SPX. And then, yeah, 7,500 ES works too because I think that lines up with 74.80. So this whole positive gamma block here, except for 74.95. Like I like it as a stabilizing force. Yep, no pullback off that doji. Oh wow, there it goes. And you were able to watch the whole movie? I remember that one being pretty long. I had to watch it over like the course of a week. But yeah, I think very odd concept with the whole futuristic thing. But it was very neat how they tied everything in. It was like a comedy drama, maybe? Yeah, a dramedy, but with sci-fi aspects. Yeah, I thought that movie was very relatable to the typical westernized Asian immigrant storyline. It was very relatable. Man, I can't help but think that short that you were in was an epic short. I mean, you got your take profit, and then if you had like a runner, holy cow, that thing would have printed. It almost looks like an equal low, but it didn't quite hit. That's a massive bottom wick. It's going to be a high volume candle too. Double bottom wick there. This has got to pull back a little bit, no? Just going to V up and then V down. Inverse V. Yeah. This is why that would be so brutal. That would be so brutal. I'm definitely that if you ever heard of the saying, don't be a dick for a tick. I've seen guys that I've traded with, and they would hold that view where it has to sweep that liquidity, and they would lose out on all their profits and go back to break even, sadly. And I was like, man, if within 1 point ES, I'm pretty happy, especially if you caught most of that move. Like from the 75.50 entry on ES and ride it down. If it's within 1 point, you've caught 99% of your move, right? Okay, not quite 99, but you know what I mean. Yeah, because I still believe that the market is still random to some degree. Yes, there are sweeps, and sweeps generally cause some sort of reaction. High volume nodes, low volume nodes, they're not exactly perfect, but they do generate some sort of reaction. And then the ticks sometimes when they do happen to the tick, you're like, wow, this, like, I believe in ICT and his religion, right? And that he's a true market maker and he wrote the code for this. And you believe it. But and then when it like misses, then there are times when it misses by a tick. And the story essentially has to be revised at that point. And you're like, okay, like the market is random. It doesn't have to sweep this. Man, I really thought we would get a little bit of a pump up here off the 2 5-minute bottom wick candles. But it doesn't look like we're going to get it. This is going to go straight to 7,500. Getting pretty close to the NQ VWAP. But there are times when that same person holds for that tick and it eventually plays out, but after like an extra hour of heartache and consolidation. I'm beginning to think this thing's going to settle around 7,500, 7,480. Massive negative gamma. Holy cow. It's really building. There's the official sweep of that. Yep, it makes a lot of sense from positioning too. This whole area becomes like stable range. Very stable, almost magnetic. I see the morning price action made playing short really hard. Because it just kept trickling up. And NQ had like, it didn't want to give. It didn't want to let up. It just kept on plowing through to all-time highs. So it was a very, very tough short to take. Thing's got to bounce somewhere, no? It's been a straight line down for an hour. This whole, for 50 minutes actually. This whole hour candle is just solid red. There's VWAP. Oh, some of the positioning's starting to come off. 75.40. That guy tapped out. Whoever had that positioning. It used to be about 1,500 in positions here. And it just flipped. Yeah, that is perfect trend line. Holy cow. I don't know, you still called the short. That was a good short. Paper or no paper, it doesn't matter. It was a good spot to take that short. I feel like I'm spectating a little too much. But I'm waiting for like an A++ trade. Something that lines up well with the dealer positioning, which doesn't always happen. False break on this trend line and continuing to the downside would be the play. Yeah, I agree. I agree. That's what I want to see. Like, we gotta retrace at some point, no? Like, we did a V up this morning, and now we're doing like the V back down. $75.05. And still about like 25 points. Yeah, 15 minutes is like, holy cow. I don't know if it's going to bounce at all. I would like to see a bounce to retest that trend line and make it seem like it's going to head back up. Yeah, this thing. We'll see no pullback. Straight line down. I personally think that like looking at the higher time frame definitely helps, especially holding for larger targets. The only problem I see though is you have to practice holding the larger targets for longer targets, because there's a lot of like noise in between. Like for instance, the 5-minute bottom wick that occurred on ES and the doji candle, like those will test your ability to hold. And then sometimes after a bottom wick, it'll run up a little back to VWAP and then finally back down, which is why I think like you have to be able to have larger sizing or multiple positions, so that way you can hold runners. But yeah, so there's 7,500 that we were talking about. We've been talking about that since like 75.20. And honestly, this looks like this is the magnet. Dark blue spot. It's going to take a lot of effort to get back above here. And as we can see, some of the positionings are starting to roll off that were long calls. 75.30s, they're still trying to go take long calls there. And all these, they're still holding these small positions here too, causing that negative gamma effect. 75.50 is coming on in large size. So that's what we're seeing in terms of negative gamma. But if we get nowhere near that, these guys will have to start selling. These guys here, I think their positioning is like, it's pretty low delta. These ones are higher delta, I would imagine. So if they're higher delta, like the dealer will have to start selling if as we approach the expiration towards the end of the day. Dealers will have to sell futures because they had bought futures to hedge and stay delta neutral as price was in the money and approach the at the money strike, whichever it is, like 70, like for instance, if we're talking about 75.15, if price action is close to there, the delta would be like at the money would be at I think around like 50 delta. Okay, let me check right now. $75.06 calls. Yeah, the deltas would be at 50 for the at the money strike. So over here at 75.15, if we move back up there, dealers had to buy in order to hedge, buy futures in order to hedge into this strike. And this is just specifically isolating 75.15. Because their customer calls, dealers have to buy into it as we approach it. And as we push above it, dealers have to buy into that too, because they are short gamma and they're short delta. So they have to buy into it to even it out. And if we drift away from it, whatever they bought up to hedge that specific 75.15, they would dealers will have to start selling as time passes by, because the delta decays lower and lower as time passes if we are out of the money. There's the bounce, and it's right off 7,500 on SPX. All right, see you later, Koshik. I'm probably going to cut out too.